In a mansion where silence reigned, a powerful man dined alone night after night, as if conversing with his own ghosts. But all that changes when a little girl, the daughter of a desperate cleaning lady, breaks the ritual with a single word: Daddy. From that moment on, cold walls give way to life, and the man discovers that a true inheritance isn't found in gold, but in those who choose to sit at his table. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. We continue. The smell of disinfectant and bleach had clung to Lucy's skin for as long as Mary Claire could remember. It was a different kind of perfume, one that other mothers didn't wear. While her schoolmates talked about their mother's French perfumes, Mary Claire had grown used to the scent that came from her mother's calloused hands, from her hastily washed clothes, and from the exhaustion that never left her eyes. They lived on the 5th floor of an old building in the Bronx, New York, in a 2-room apartment that felt more like a closet with windows. The main room served as a living room, kitchen, and bedroom all at once. Mary Claire slept in a twin bed pushed against the wall, while Lucy stretched out on the sofa bed that creaked with every movement. But for a 7-year-old girl, that cramped little corner was the entire world. Their routine began before the sun was up. Lucy would get up at 5:30 in the morning, take a quick shower to save hot water, and prepare watery coffee with milk and a simple roll with margarine. Mary Claire would wake to the sound of the kettle and know she had 20 minutes to get ready before accompanying her mother to work. This morning journey was the girls' favorite time of day. They would walk through the streets still damp with dew, pass by Mr. Johnson's bakery, where Lucy always greeted the baker with a tired but sincere smile, and continue along the Grand Concourse, until they reached the commercial building where Lucy had worked as a cleaner for almost 3 years. During this 40-minute walk, mother and daughter talked about everything and nothing. Lucy told stories from when she was younger, when she lived upstate with her family. She spoke of Mary Claire's great-grandfather, a man she only knew through her mother's stories but who had become an almost legendary figure in her imagination. His name was Anthony. He had been a mechanic his whole life, the kind who worked with hands dirty with grease and a heart clean of malice. According to Lucy, he never refused help to anyone who needed it, even if it meant working for free or lending money he didn't have. He was known in the small town where he lived as someone you could trust, someone who solved other people's problems as if they were his own. In her pants pocket, Mary Claire kept a small St. Christopher medallion that had belonged to her great-grandfather. It was the only heirloom left of him, passed from hand to hand until it reached her. The metal was tarnished by time, and the broken chain had been replaced with a simple cotton cord. But for the girl, that medallion carried all the strength and goodness of the man she had never met. In the building where Lucy worked, Mary Claire had a special refuge. The doorman, Mr. Marcus, was a man in his early 60s who had also been a mechanic before taking on this quieter job. He had large, rough hands, full of scars from years of handling tools and engines, but his gaze was gentle and patient. While Lucy went upstairs to start her shift, cleaning the offices on the upper floors, Mary Claire would stay with Mr. Marcus at the doorman's station. There, at a small desk next to the main entrance, she would do her homework or simply watch the doorman fix broken objects that the residents brought him. Mr. Marcus had a special way of explaining things. He showed Mary Claire how a clothes iron worked on the inside, how to fix a fan that no longer spun, how to fix a faulty light switch. The girl absorbed every word, every gesture, every technique like a sponge. It was impressive how quickly she understood things that many children her age paid no attention to. Mr. Marcus always said that Mary Claire was born with a gift, a rare intuition for understanding how things worked and how to fix them when they broke. During breaks, when no one was entering or leaving the building, Mr. Marcus would tell stories from his time working at an auto repair shop in Midtown Manhattan. He spoke of the cars he fixed, the desperate customers who showed up with urgent problems, the creative solutions he had to invent when he didn't have the right part available. Mary Claire listened to everything with shining eyes. She asked intelligent questions, wanted to know details, and asked Mr. Marcus to repeat explanations about how an engine worked or how to identify a problem in a vehicle's electrical system. The doorman was amazed by the girl's curiosity and her ability to understand. Sometimes when there were a few old cars parked nearby that needed minor repairs, Mr. Marcus would call Mary Claire over to watch him work. She would hold the flashlight while he checked under the hood, pass him the tools when he asked, and always pay close attention to his every move. The school was a 15-minute walk from the commercial building. At 7:30, Mary Claire would say goodbye to Mr. Marcus and her mother and head off alone for another day of classes. It was a simple public school, with peeling walls and graffiti-covered desks, but the teachers were dedicated and did their best to provide the best possible education. Mary Claire was an exemplary student, always attentive, always participating, always with her homework done. The teachers liked her not only for her good grades, but for the politeness and maturity she showed. She seemed older than she really was, as if life had already taught her lessons that other children would only learn years later. At recess, while the other girls played with dolls or jumped rope, Mary Claire preferred to sit in a corner of the yard and watch the activity. She liked to see how things worked around her, how problems arose and how they were solved. When a classmate broke a toy or lost a piece from a game, she was always the first to try to help fix it. Her classmates saw her as a different kind of girl, but not in a negative way. She was respected for her intelligence and kindness. She never got into trouble, never spoke ill of anyone, and was always willing to help anyone who needed it. Some teachers had already commented among themselves that this girl had a bright future ahead of her if she got the right opportunities. The late afternoon was another special time in Mary Claire's routine. When classes ended at 5 o'clock, she would return to the building where Lucy worked and stay with Mr. Marcus again until her mother came down to go home. This period, between 5:30 and 6:30, was when the doorman had more free time because the building's traffic slowed down. It was during this time that the best conversations and lessons took place. Mr. Marcus took the opportunity to show Mary Claire more complex things, techniques that required more concentration and patience. The girl always paid full attention, took notes in an old notebook her mother had given her and practiced the movements until she could repeat everything on her own. Lucy always came down at 6:30 on the dot. She was never late, never left early. She was an exemplary employee, recognized for her dedication and the quality of her work. Her bosses trusted her with important tasks, and the other employees respected her for her honesty and humility. The walk home was quieter than the one in the morning. Mother and daughter walked slowly, talking about how their day had been. Lucy would ask about school, about her subjects, about her classmates. Mary Claire would tell her what she had learned with Mr. Marcus, show her the notes in her notebook, and repeat the explanations she had heard. Lucy always listened with attention and affection. Although she didn't understand much about mechanics or repairs, she could see that these conversations were good for her daughter. She saw in Mary Claire's eyes a genuine passion for learning, a thirst for knowledge that reminded her a lot of the girl's father. Mary Claire's father had died when she was only 2, the victim of a construction accident. He was a simple, hard-working man who dreamed of giving his family a better life. Lucy still kept some of his tools in an old box under the bed. Sometimes when Mary Claire was asleep, she would open the box and look at those objects, remembering her husband and imagining how proud he would be of the daughter they had raised. Their dinner was always simple, but made with love. Rice, beans, and whatever protein Lucy could afford with the little money left after paying the bills. They ate while watching the evening news on the small television that sat on a plastic table next to the refrigerator. Mary Claire always asked questions about the news, wanting to understand what was happening in the world, showing a curiosity that went far beyond her age. After dinner, it was time for homework. Lucy helped where she could, but Mary Claire already showed an impressive independence in her studies. She did her assignments on her own, organized her materials for the next day, and still found time to read the books she borrowed from the school library. Before bed, mother and daughter would always talk for a little while. It was an intimate moment, where Lucy would tell more family stories, talk about her dreams for their future, and Mary Claire would share her own dreams and plans. The girl often spoke of wanting to study hard, to one day be able to help her mother have an easier life, to perhaps work fixing important things like her great-grandfather Anthony did. Lucy listened with a heart tight with love and pride, but also with a hint of sadness, knowing that opportunities in life were limited for people like them. Even so, she always encouraged her daughter to dream big. She said that with dedication and honesty, anything was possible. She repeated the words her own mother had told her as a child, words that time had proven to be true, even when the path was harder than expected. Mary Claire fell asleep every night, clutching her great-grandfather Anthony's medallion, feeling a special connection to the man she had never known, but whose values and principles seemed to run in her veins. She often dreamed that she was working alongside him in an old workshop, learning secrets and techniques that only he knew. The next morning, the cycle would begin again. Lucy would wake up early, prepare breakfast, and the two would leave together. For another day. They had no idea that the approaching rainy Tuesday would change their lives forever, in a way they couldn't have imagined even in their most optimistic dreams. The rain started before dawn, hammering against the small apartment window as if it wanted to force its way in. Lucy woke up to the noise and looked at the alarm clock. 5 in the morning. She sighed deeply, knowing it would be a complicated morning. Rain in New York City always meant slow traffic, crowded buses, and people who were more impatient than usual. She got up slowly, trying not to make a sound so as not to wake Mary Claire early, but the girl's eyes were already open, staring at the ceiling. It was as if she had an internal alarm that never failed. "Good morning, sweetie," Lucy whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "Did the rain wake you up too?" Mary Claire nodded, stretching her arms out. "It's so loud. And the wind, too. I heard a window banging somewhere." The two got up and began their morning routine, but everything was different that Tuesday. The shower water took longer to heat up, the coffee was weaker because Lucy was distracted thinking about the rush ahead, and the umbrella they had was missing 2 spokes, a result of many years of use. When they left the building at 6:15, the rain had eased a little, but the wind was still strong. The cheap umbrella turned inside out with every gust, and Lucy had to stop from time to fix it, always muttering words under her breath that Mary Claire pretended not to hear. The Grand Concourse was busier than usual. Cars crept along, honking impatiently, and the bus stops were crammed with wet, grumpy people. Lucy checked her watch every 5 minutes, mentally calculating if they would make it on time. "We'll take the shortcut today," she decided, taking Mary Claire by the hand and turning off the main avenue onto the neighborhood's side streets. It was a shortcut she knew well but usually avoided because it passed through some less busy areas. Mary Claire didn't complain. In fact, she liked discovering different routes. She observed the houses, the parked cars, the people they met along the way. On that rainy morning, everything seemed grayer and more melancholic, but also more interesting somehow. It was when they turned a corner onto Chestnut Street that they saw the scene. A large, well-maintained black car was stopped at the curb, with its hazard lights blinking. An elderly man, completely soaked, was struggling with a hydraulic jack next to the right rear tire, which was completely flat. The man must have been in his 70s, tall and thin, with white hair stuck to his forehead by the rain. He was wearing an expensive suit, which was now soaked and wrinkled. His hands were shaking, whether from cold nerves or exhaustion was unclear. The hydraulic jack kept slipping in his wet hands, and he seemed completely lost as to how to proceed. Mary Claire stopped walking. She watched the scene for a few seconds, analyzing the situation with the same attentive gaze that Mr. Marcus knew so well. The jack's position was wrong, she realized immediately. The man was trying to support it on the car's body panel, where there wasn't enough structure to bear the weight. Lucy, who was a few steps ahead, noticed her daughter had stopped and came back for her. "Come on, Mary Claire, we're late, we can't waste time now." But the girl didn't move. She kept looking at the man, who at that moment slipped on the wet sidewalk and nearly fell under the car. That's when she let go of her mother's hand and ran towards the elderly man. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. "Mary Claire, get back here right now," she shouted, running after her daughter. But the girl was already kneeling on the wet sidewalk, next to the confused man. "Sir, you're putting it in the wrong place," Mary Claire said, with a firm, confident voice, unceremoniously taking the jack from his hands. "It has to go on the chassis, not to the body. You'll damage the car and you could hurt yourself." The man looked at the small girl with a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and curiosity. Who was this child who spoke with such certainty about something that he, an adult, couldn't figure out? Mary Claire repositioned the hydraulic jack in the correct spot, under the chassis, where the car's frame was strongest. Then, she began to turn the tool with precise movements, exactly as Mr. Marcus had taught her so many times. "Do you have the lug wrench?" she asked, without looking up from what she was doing. The man, still stunned, pointed to the inside of the car. "It's in the trunk with the spare tire." Mary Claire nodded and continued working the jack. When the car was lifted high enough, she asked the man to get the lug wrench and began to loosen the bolts on the flat tire. Her small hands held the tool with an impressive firmness. Meanwhile, Lucy was in a state of total panic. She looked at the clock, at her daughter, at the man, and felt like she was living a nightmare. 6:45 in the morning. Her shift started at 7, sharp. There was no more time to get there on schedule. "Mary Claire, for God's sake," she whispered, approaching her daughter with tears of desperation in her eyes. "You're going to make me lose my job. We can't be late." The girl looked up at her mother, and with a calmness that didn't match her 7 years, said simply, "He could have fallen, Mum. The jack was in the wrong place. He could have gotten hurt." The man, who until then had just been watching, realized the gravity of the situation for the mother and daughter. He overheard their conversation and understood that his need for help was causing a serious problem for them. "Mum," he said to Lucy, "if you're in a hurry, I can call someone to finish this. I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." Lucy looked at him gratefully, but Mary Claire shook her head. "It's almost done," she said, carefully removing the flat tire. "Just have to put on the spare and tighten the bolts. 5 minutes." And indeed, in 5 minutes, Mary Claire had changed the tire completely. She removed the flat, put the spare in its place, tightened all, the bolts in the correct sequence, and even checked if the spare tire's pressure was adequate. She did it all with a precision that left the man completely impressed. When she was finished, she lowered the hydraulic jack and put the tools back in the trunk. The man stood beside the car, looking at this small girl as if she were a phenomenon he couldn't comprehend. "It's done," Mary Claire said, wiping her hands on her already rain-dirtied pants. "You can drive normally, but try to get this tire replaced with a new one when you get home. A spare isn't meant to be used for a long time." The man was silent for a few seconds, processing everything that had happened. Then, he took his wallet from the inner pocket of his wet jacket and offered Mary Claire some bills. "No, thank you," she said, refusing the money without a second thought. "My mum says helping people is an obligation, not a job." Lucy, who had been watching everything in a state of emotional shock, approached and took her daughter's hand. "Thank you, sir," she said to the man, "but now we really have to go, excuse us." And they ran off, leaving the man standing in the rain next to his repaired car, trying to understand what had just happened. During the 15-minute run to the commercial building, Lucy didn't say a word. Mary Claire also remained silent, feeling that she had done something very wrong, even without understanding exactly what. She only knew that her mother was very worried, and that it was all her fault. When they arrived at the building, it was 7:10 in the morning, 10 minutes late. For any other job, it might not have been a problem, but the company where Lucy worked had strict rules about punctuality, and there was no room for exceptions. Lucy said a quick goodbye to her daughter, gave her a kiss on her wet forehead, and ran up to the elevator. Mr. Marcus was at his station, wondering about their lateness, but he didn't ask any questions. He just greeted Mary Claire with a worried smile. The girl sat in her usual little chair next to the doorman's desk, but she couldn't concentrate on her homework. She stared at her hands, which were still dirty with grease from the tire, and thought about the desperate expression she had seen on her mother's face. Up on the 12th floor, Lucy faced the most humiliating situation of her professional life. She arrived at the locker room to find her locker empty, her things in a plastic bag next to the bench. A younger woman was changing to start work, wearing the same uniform Lucy used to wear. The supervisor, Mr. Roberts, a middle-aged man with a stern face, was waiting for her with a clipboard in his hand and a cold expression. "Lucy Evans," he said, reading the name on the clipboard. 10 minutes late. As per company policy, employees who are late without prior justification are immediately dismissed. You can collect your things and leave." Lucy felt the floor disappear from under her feet. "Mr. Roberts, please. It was only 10 minutes. In 3 years of working here, I've never been late a single day. There was a problem with the rain, the traffic—" "Rules are rules," he interrupted, showing no emotion. "The company cannot rely on employees who don't keep to their schedules. We have already arranged for your replacement." And just like that, with less than 5 minutes of conversation, 3 years of dedicated work were erased by a 10-minute delay caused by an act of kindness. Lucy went back down to the ground floor, carrying the bag with her belongings, trying to hold back her tears until she was out of the building. Mr. Marcus immediately knew something was wrong when he saw her coming out of the elevator at that time, but she just shook her head, indicating that she didn't want to talk about it in front of Mary Claire. The girl, however, understood everything just by looking at her mother's face. The plastic bag, the wrong time, the red eyes, it all became clear in a terrible instant. "Mum," she whispered, getting up from her chair, "I messed everything up, didn't I?" Lucy couldn't answer. She just took her daughter's hand and whispered a "thank you" to Mr. Marcus, who watched them leave the building with a look of deep sadness. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained grey and heavy. Mother and daughter walked in silence through the neighborhood streets, each lost in her own thoughts and fears. Mary Claire felt guilty for insisting on helping the man with the tire. Lucy felt guilty for not having taught her daughter to understand that sometimes life requires us to ignore others' problems to take care of our own. But deep down, despite all the pain and worry of that moment, neither of them completely regretted what had happened. Mary Claire knew she had done the right thing by helping someone in need, and Lucy, despite her desperation, felt proud of the daughter she had raised. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment, the man with the tire was sitting in his car, still parked on the same street where it all happened, making a few phone calls that would change their lives forever. He had noted the name of the company printed on the ID badge Lucy wore around her neck, and now he was very interested in learning more about this family that had crossed his path on a rainy Tuesday morning. The silence inside the apartment that morning was unlike any Mary Claire had ever experienced. It was a heavy silence, filled with worry and uncertainty. Lucy was sitting on the edge of the sofa bed, still holding the plastic bag with her things from work, as if she couldn't accept that this had really happened. Mary Claire approached slowly, carrying the weight of guilt on her small shoulders. She sat next to her mother and looked at her own hands, which still had traces of grease under the nails. "Mum," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would cause trouble. I just wanted to help." Lucy looked up at her daughter. For a moment she felt a terrible anger at the whole situation, at how the world worked, at how sometimes doing the right thing could have such bad consequences. But when she saw Mary Claire's sad little face, the anger transformed into something else. "You did the right thing, sweetie," she said, pulling her daughter close. "The problem isn't that you helped. The problem is that we live in a world where sometimes we can't afford to do the right thing. But Great-Grandpa Anthony always helped everyone, and you said he never regretted it." Lucy sighed deeply. "That's true. He always helped. But times were different. Things were simpler. Nowadays, everything is more complicated." The two of them hugged on the sofa, trying to process what had happened and what they would do now. The money they had saved would cover that month's rent, but not the next. Lucy would need to find another job quickly, and that wouldn't be easy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a luxurious office on the top floor of one of the tallest buildings in downtown Manhattan, the man with the tire was sitting behind a huge desk making phone calls. "Hello, Margaret," he said to his assistant. "I need some information urgently. I want to know everything about an employee at our company. Her name is Lucy Evans. She works on the cleaning crew at the Park Avenue building." The assistant, used to her boss's unusual requests, wrote down the name and promised to have the information in a few hours. The man hung up the phone and sat thoughtfully, spinning a pen between his fingers. Edward Sterling couldn't get the image of that little girl out of his head, kneeling in the rain, fixing his car with a competence he had never seen in someone so young. At 72, after building a business empire from scratch, he thought he had seen it all. But that morning had shown him that he could still be surprised. Edward was the owner of one of the largest engineering and construction companies in the country. He had started as a simple laborer, still young, and had climbed every rung of the ladder through hard work and determination. He knew people, he could recognize potential when he saw it, and he had developed a keen instinct for judging character. That morning, with his driver out sick, he had decided to drive himself to an important meeting. The flat tire had been just an annoying setback until that girl appeared. What had impressed him most wasn't just her technical knowledge, but her attitude, the firmness with which she decided to help, the competence with which she performed the job, and especially her refusal of the money he offered. "Helping people is an obligation, not a job," she had said. Edward had known many engineers, mechanics, and technicians in his life, some with decades of experience, with degrees and certifications, but he had never seen someone with that combination of practical knowledge and solid values in a 7-year-old child. The afternoon passed slowly for Lucy and Mary Claire. The girl didn't go to school because Lucy didn't feel up to being alone at that moment. The two stayed home, trying to make plans, calculating and recalculating their finances, wondering where Lucy could look for a job. Mary Claire tried to help as best she could. She suggested her mother look for work at other companies, in shopping malls, in private homes. She said she could find something to do on weekends to help with money. Lucy smiled sadly at her daughter's suggestions, admiring how such a young child was already thinking about such adult responsibilities. Late that afternoon, when Edward's assistant brought the requested information, he discovered things that intrigued him even more. Lucy Evans, 32 years, old, a widow, an exemplary employee for 3 years. She had never been late, never been absent without justification, never received any complaints. Her supervisor's reviews were always positive, highlighting her dedication and honesty. Edward also learned about her dismissal that morning. 10 minutes late, dismissed immediately. He felt a pang of guilt, realizing that, indirectly, he had been responsible for that injustice. But it was the information about Mary Claire that really caught his attention. The girl attended a public school, was one of the top students in her class, and her teachers always commented on her maturity and above-average intelligence. Her father had died when she was very young in a construction accident. Edward spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about that family. He remembered his own childhood, being raised by a single mother after his father had died on a construction site. He remembered the hardships, the financial struggles, how difficult it had been to get opportunities. At the same time, he thought about the company he had built, hundreds of employees, projects in several states, a revenue that grew year after year. But lately, Edward felt that something was missing. Business was good, money was plentiful, but he no longer felt the passion of the early years. Maybe it was his age, maybe it was the fact that he had no children to leave his legacy to, maybe it was just the fatigue of so many years of work. But that afternoon, after meeting Mary Claire, he felt something different, an energy, a curiosity he hadn't experienced in a long time. On Wednesday morning, Lucy went out early to look for a job. She left Mary Claire with a trusted neighbor and went from door to door handing out resumes, filling out applications and going through quick, disheartening interviews. The job market was tough, she quickly realized. Many companies weren't even hiring. Others offered wages that barely covered basic expenses. Some required experience in fields she didn't have. Others wanted younger employees or had schedules she couldn't manage because of Mary Claire. At the end of the day, when she returned home, Lucy was exhausted and discouraged. The neighbor told her that Mary Claire had been quiet all day, doing her homework and helping with small things around the house. The girl was clearly worried, even though she tried to hide it. During dinner, which was even simpler than usual, Mary Claire asked a question that took Lucy by surprise. "Mom, do you think the man with the tire was okay? Do you think he got where he was going?" Lucy stopped eating and looked at her daughter. "He probably was. Why are you thinking about that?" "I don't know. I just wonder if he was late for something important. What if something bad had happened if we hadn't stopped to help?" That question echoed in Lucy's mind all night. Mary Claire had done what she believed was right without knowing the consequences, and maybe, Lucy reflected, that said something important about the character of the daughter she was raising. On Thursday, Edward Sterling made a decision. He put on simple clothes, took an old car he kept in his garage, and drove to the neighborhood where Lucy and Mary Claire lived. He wanted to see them again, to better understand what kind of people they were, to perhaps find a way to repay the help he had received. He spent the whole morning watching the activity on their street. He saw Lucy leave early, probably to look for a job. He saw Mary Claire at the apartment window reading a book. He saw the neighbor arrive to stay with the girl. It was then that Edward realized he couldn't just show up at their door like a complete stranger. He needed a more careful, more natural approach. He didn't want to scare anyone or create an awkward situation. He spent the afternoon thinking of a strategy. How could he approach them without revealing who he really was? How could he repay the help he received without sounding condescending or intrusive? How could he find out more about Mary Claire without seeming like a strange man interested in a child? The answer came when he remembered the ID badge he had seen around Lucy's neck. She worked for his company, or rather, had worked there until 2 days ago. That gave him the perfect excuse to seek them out. On Friday morning, Edward called the company's human resources department and asked for information about Lucy's dismissal. He found out the details. 10 minutes late. Immediate dismissal as per regulations, replacement already arranged. Edward felt a controlled anger upon hearing this. He knew the supervisor who had made the decision, Robert Santos, a man he had never much liked, but who was efficient at his job. Someone who followed rules to the letter with no room for exceptions or compassion. At that moment, Edward made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, Robert Santos would be transferred to another position, away from direct contact with employees. Second, he would personally go to Lucy and Mary Claire's home to make them an offer they couldn't refuse. But before that, he wanted to investigate a little more. He asked his assistant to arrange an informal chat with some employees who knew Lucy. He wanted to hear opinions, to know how she was seen by her colleagues, to understand what kind of person she really was. The information he received was all positive. Lucy was described as a hard-working, honest person, polite to everyone, always willing to help colleagues in need, always punctual, always responsible. Several employees commented that they would miss her. Edward also asked for information about her daughter. He found out that Mary Claire was known in the building, that she had a good relationship with the doorman, and that she sometimes helped fix small things. Some employees commented on the girl's intelligence, on how polite and mature she was for her age. All of this confirmed the first impression Edward had had on that rainy morning. This family was special, had solid values, and deserved a better opportunity in life. On Saturday morning, Edward finally prepared to make his visit. He chose simple clothes, took the old car, and drove to the address he had gotten from the company files. His heart beat faster than usual, like a nervous young man going on an important date. He had no idea how Lucy and Mary Claire would react to seeing him again. He didn't know if they would recognize him, if they would be suspicious, if they would understand his intentions. But he knew he had to try. That girl had changed something in him, had awakened a desire to make a difference in someone's life. When he parked the car in front of the building where they lived, Edward took a deep breath and prepared himself for what could be one of the most important conversations of his life. The doorbell's ring on Saturday morning made Lucy look up from the job listings she was flipping through for the 10th time that week. Mary Claire was sitting on the floor, organizing her school books into a neat pile when she heard the sound. "Who could that be?" Lucy murmured, finding it strange. It was too early for visitors, and they weren't expecting anyone. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. On the other side was a man with white hair wearing simple clothes, with an old car parked on the street. For a few seconds, she didn't recognize him. Then, the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. "Mary Claire," she whispered, calling her daughter. "Come here." The girl came over and Lucy had her look through the peephole. "What do you see?" Mary Claire stood on her tiptoes to get a look. "It's the man with the tire," she said simply. "What's he doing here?" That was the exact question Lucy was asking herself. How had this man gotten their address? What did he want? Was it safe to open the door? Edward, on the outside, could sense the hesitation. He knew his presence there was unusual, perhaps even frightening. He decided to identify himself to reassure the mother and daughter. "Mrs. Evans," he said, speaking loud enough to be heard through the door. "My name is Edward Sterling. We met on Tuesday when your daughter helped me with my car's flat tire. I would very much like to speak with you both, if possible." Lucy and Mary Claire looked at each other. There was nothing threatening in the man's voice. On the contrary, it sounded respectful and even a little nervous. Still, Lucy hesitated. Receiving unknown visitors was not something she usually did. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, the door still closed. Edward took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. "About your dismissal from the company where you worked, and about how I would like to correct an injustice." Lucy felt her heart race. How did this man know about her dismissal? How had he found out where she worked, where she lived? What was going on? "Mom," whispered Mary Claire, tugging on the hem of her mother's skirt. "He seems like a good person. Remember how grateful he was when I finished fixing the tire?" After a few more seconds of hesitation, Lucy decided to open the door, keeping the security chain on. Through the crack, she looked at Edward again. "How do you know where I work?" she asked directly. Edward realized he needed to be completely honest, even if it made things more complicated. "It's a long story, Mrs. Evans. May I come in to explain? I promise I will clear everything up." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that Lucy recognized instinctively. She removed the chain and opened the door completely, gesturing for him to enter. The small apartment felt even smaller with Edward's presence. He looked around discreetly, noting the simple furniture, the impeccable organization despite the limited space. Mary Claire's school books neatly stacked in the corner. "Please have a seat," Lucy said, indicating the sofa. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "I'd love some, thank you," Edward replied, sitting down carefully. While Lucy prepared the coffee, Mary Claire watched the man with curiosity. It was the first time she had seen him up close without the rain and the emergency situation. He seemed older than she had noticed on Tuesday, but he had kind eyes and hands that looked accustomed to work. "Is your car running well?" she asked, breaking the silence. Edward smiled. "Perfectly, you did an excellent job. Where did you learn? To change a tire?" "From Mr. Marcus, the doorman at the building where my mum used to work," the girl corrected herself, looking down. Lucy returned with the coffee and sat on the edge of the armchair, still tense. "Now, please, explain to me how you found me and what you're doing here." Edward took a sip of coffee and took a deep breath. He started from the beginning. He told them that on Tuesday morning, his driver had been out sick, and he had decided to drive himself to an important meeting. He talked about the flat tire, about how he was fumbling with the hydraulic jack, about how Mary Claire had appeared like a guardian angel. Then his voice grew more serious. He explained that he had noticed the company ID badge around Lucy's neck and had become curious to learn more about the family that had helped him so generously. "That's when I discovered something that made me feel terrible," he continued. "I learned that you were fired on Tuesday because of the delay, a delay that happened because your daughter stopped to help me." Lucy felt a mix of embarrassment and sadness. "It's not your fault, sir. The company's rules are clear, and I knew the risks of being late." Edward shook his head vigorously. "I don't accept that. An exemplary employee with 3 years of impeccable work cannot be fired for a 10-minute delay caused by an act of kindness." He paused, looking from Lucy to Mary Claire. "There's something I haven't told you yet, something important." The two waited expectantly, sensing that a significant revelation was coming. "My name is Edward Sterling," he said slowly, "and I am the owner of the company where you worked." The silence that followed was absolute. Lucy's jaw dropped as she processed the information. Mary Claire looked from her mother to Edward, trying to understand the implications of what she had just heard. "You're the owner?" Lucy finally managed to articulate. Edward nodded. "I founded that company 40 years ago. I started as a simple laborer and built everything from the ground up. And I can assure you that what happened to you does not reflect the values I try to instill in my business." Lucy was in shock. The man with the tire, the kind gentleman her daughter had helped in the rain, was actually the owner of the entire company. He was one of the wealthiest businessmen in New York, someone she only knew from newspaper articles. "But why were you driving by yourself?" asked Mary Claire, ever practical. Don't rich people have drivers? Edward laughed for the first time since he had arrived. I do, but sometimes I like to drive myself. It reminds me of when I was younger, when I was still struggling to make my way in life. He leaned forward, moving closer to them. You know, Mary Claire, I also lost my father when I was a child. I was also raised by a mother who worked very hard to support us. I know how difficult it is when you have little money and big dreams. Lucy felt her eyes well up. This powerful man was here, in her small living room, sharing personal memories and showing a humanity she never expected to find. That's why, Edward continued, I want to do something. It's not charity, it's not pity, it's justice. It's recognizing the value of people who deserve better opportunities. He stood up and walked to the small apartment window, looking out at the busy street. When he turned back to them, his voice was firm and decisive. Lucy, he said, you are not just coming back to the company. I want you to take over as the supervisor of all the cleaning teams. A salary 3 times what you were making, full training, and a bonus to compensate for the days you were out of work. Lucy brought her hands to her chest, her heart pounding. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. And Mary Claire, Edward continued, turning to the girl, you will be enrolled in the best private school in the city. Everything paid. For tuition, fees, books, uniforms, transportation. And when you grow up, if you want to study engineering or anything else, let me know. I'll be waiting. Mary Claire looked at her mother with wide eyes. Lucy was crying silently, unable to speak. But why? The girl managed to ask. Why do you want to do this for us? Edward knelt in front of Mary Claire, bringing himself to her eye level. Because you taught me something I had forgotten. You taught me that there are people in the world who do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it might cause problems. People who help others without expecting anything in return. He paused, emotional. And because when I was your age, someone gave me an opportunity too. Someone believed in me when I was just a poor boy with big dreams. Now it's my turn to believe in you. Lucy finally managed to speak, her voice choked with emotion. Mr. Sterling, we don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, he replied, standing up. You just need to accept, and promise me that you will take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. Mary Claire walked up to him and, to everyone's surprise, hugged his legs. Thank you for believing in us, she said simply. Edward felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. He returned the girl's hug and then extended his hand to Lucy. Shall we start on Monday? He asked. Lucy shook his hand, feeling a strength and hope she thought she had lost forever. Yes, we'll start on Monday. When Edward left the apartment an hour later, mother and daughter remained on the sofa, hugging, trying to process everything that had happened. In a matter of minutes, their lives had changed completely. The financial problems, the fear of the future, the uncertainty of tomorrow, it had all transformed into infinite possibilities. Mary Claire took out the medallion of her great-grandfather Anthony that she always carried in her pocket. Do you think he would be proud of us? She asked her mother. Lucy kissed her daughter's forehead. I'm sure of it. And you know why? Because you did exactly what he would have done. You helped someone who needed it without thinking of a reward. That night they slept in each other's arms, as they always did, during important moments. But this time it wasn't fear or worry that united them. It was gratitude, hope, and the certainty that sometimes, when we do good without expecting anything in return, the universe finds a way to reward us in ways we could never imagine. Outside, life on the street continued as usual. Cars passed, people walked hurriedly, the world went on its normal rhythm. But inside that small fifth-floor apartment, 2 lives had been transformed forever by a simple act of kindness on a rainy Tuesday morning. Monday arrived with a completely different feeling for Lucy and Mary Claire. For the first time in a long time, the alarm clock's ring at 5:30 in the morning brought anticipation instead of resignation. The day ahead would no longer be a tiresome repetition of their old routine, but the beginning of a completely new adventure. Lucy had spent all of Sunday feeling nervous, alternating between moments of pure joy and bouts of anxiety. What Edward had offered seemed too good to be true. A part of her still feared it might be a misunderstanding, that when it came time to put everything into practice, things wouldn't work out as promised. Mary Claire, on the other hand, showed a confidence that surprised her mother. During breakfast, while Lucy nervously stirred her spoon in her cup, the girl ate with a healthy appetite and talked excitedly about their plans for the day. "Mom," she said, touching the medallion of her great-grandfather Anthony that she now wore around her neck, "Mr. Sterling seems like a man of his word. If he said he would do it, he will." Lucy smiled, admiring her daughter's precocious wisdom. "I hope you're right, sweetie. We'll see how it goes." When they arrived at the commercial building at 6:45 in the morning, they were greeted by an elegant middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Margaret, Edward's personal assistant. She had been instructed to accompany Lucy during her first few days of transition. "Mrs. Evans," Margaret said, with a professional yet warm smile, "Mr. Sterling asked me to assist you with all the procedures. Let's start with your new office." Lucy almost tripped over her own feet. An office? She had never had an office in her life. She had always worked with cleaning carts, buckets and brooms. The idea of having a desk, a phone and a computer seemed surreal. The office was on the 8th floor, in a small but well-equipped room with a view of the street. There was a desk, 2 chairs, a computer, a phone, and even a small refrigerator in the corner. On the wall hung a plaque with the company's mission statement and a photo of the main building. "Here you will coordinate the work of all the cleaning teams," Margaret explained. "There are 42 people spread across 3 shifts. Mr. Sterling wants you to spend the next few weeks getting to know everyone, understanding how each section works, identifying problems, and suggesting improvements." Lucy sat in the swivel chair behind the desk and for a moment allowed herself to feel the reality of the situation. 3 days earlier, she had been on her knees cleaning these same hallways, scrubbing the floor with a brush. Now she would be supervising them from a position of leadership. Meanwhile, Mary Claire was being taken by Edward personally to see her new school. St. Teresa's Academy was on the Upper East Side, in an affluent part of the city the girl only knew from television shows. Edward had insisted on being with her on this first day, wanting to ensure the transition was as smooth as possible. During the ride in the chauffeured car, he talked with Mary Claire about her expectations and fears. "Are you nervous?" he asked, watching as the girl looked with fascination at the well-kept streets and elegant buildings. "A little," she admitted. "The other kids will be very different from me. They've probably always gone to good schools. They must know things I don't." Edward nodded understandingly. "It's normal to feel that way. I felt the same when I got my first opportunity at a big company, but you know what I discovered? People are people everywhere, and you have something that many of these kids might not have, real-life experience and a will to learn." St. Teresa's Academy was truly impressive. It had modern laboratories, a huge library, sports courts, a swimming pool, and even a small theatre. The headmistress, Mrs. Regina, a kind lady with greying hair, received Mary Claire with special attention. Edward had spoken with the headmistress beforehand, explaining the girl's situation without going into unnecessary detail. Mrs. Regina had experience with scholarship students and knew how to handle integrations successfully. "Mary Claire," the headmistress, said, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level, "I know you are a very dedicated student. Here you will find excellent teachers and classmates who will surely want to be your friends. Would you like to see your classroom?" The second-grade classroom was 3 times the size of the one at the public school where Mary Claire used to study. There were only 20 students, each with their own desk, a smartboard, and shelves full of books. The other children looked with curiosity at the new girl, especially since she was being introduced by the headmistress herself. The teacher, Ms. Carter, was young and energetic. She welcomed Mary Claire and placed her at a desk next to a girl named Sophia, who offered to help her get settled. During the first few days, both Lucy and Mary Claire faced significant challenges. For Lucy, the biggest difficulty was being accepted by the employees she now supervised. Many of them had been her co-workers, and some showed resistance to taking orders from someone who, until recently, had done the same job they did. "Mrs. Evans," said Charles, an older employee, during a meeting, "with all due respect, but you know how hard it is for us to accept that someone who cleaned bathrooms alongside us is now our boss." Lucy took a deep breath, remembering the advice Edward had given her. "I understand completely, Charles. And that's exactly why I can help you better than anyone else. I know what it's like to do this job. I know the difficulties. I know when a deadline is impossible or when a material isn't working right." She paused, looking at each person in the small meeting room. "I'm not here to be superior to you. I'm here to be a bridge between you and the administration, to ensure you have the conditions and the recognition you deserve." Gradually, the resistance began to fade. Lucy demonstrated a deep knowledge of the work, an understanding of the employees' daily struggles, and an organizational ability that surprised everyone. She implemented improvements in schedules, secured better quality materials, and established a rotation system that made the work less strenuous. For Mary Claire, the challenges were different, but just as significant. The other children weren't mean, but they clearly came from a different world. They talked about international travel, expensive sneakers, parties at elegant clubs, things she only knew from movies. During recess on the third day, Mary Claire was sitting alone in the schoolyard when Sophia approached with 2 other classmates. "Mary Claire," Sophia said, "we want to know where you came from. You talk differently from the other girls who have studied here." Mary Claire hesitated for a moment, afraid the truth might cause problems, but then she remembered Edward's words about always being honest, regardless of the circumstances. "I lived in the Bronx," she said simply. "My mom is a cleaner and I went to a public school. I'm here because a very kind man decided to help us." The girls were silent for a few seconds. Then one of them, named Beatrice, asked a question Mary Claire didn't expect. "And what's it like to live in the Bronx? It must be very different from the Upper East Side." It wasn't a malicious question, but one of genuine curiosity. Mary Claire realized her classmates weren't prejudiced, just uninformed. She began to tell them about her old life, about Mr. Marcus and the mechanics lessons, about the morning walks with her mother, about the simplicity but also the love that existed in her home. To her surprise, the other girls were fascinated by her stories. They had grown up in a world of comfort and privilege, but often felt their lives were empty of real experiences. Mary Claire's story was like a window into a world they knew nothing about. As the weeks went by, Mary Claire not only integrated into the class, but became one of the most popular students. Her intelligence, combined with her humility and life experience, created a combination that the other students sincerely admired. Edward kept in regular contact with the mother and daughter, visiting them every 2 weeks to see how they were adapting. He was impressed with the progress of both. Lucy had become a respected and efficient supervisor, while Mary Claire was shining academically at her new school. During one of these visits, on a Saturday afternoon, Edward made a special proposal to Mary Claire. "I have an idea," he said as they had coffee in the living room of their now better furnished apartment. "How about you spend some weekends with me, learning about engineering in a practical way? I have several construction projects underway, and I know excellent engineers who could teach you interesting things." Mary Claire's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Really? I could see how they build real buildings?" "Of course. And not just see. You can also learn to read blueprints, understand basic calculations, and get to know different materials. If you have a talent for fixing things, I'm sure you also have a talent for creating things." Lucy watched the conversation with a heart full of gratitude and admiration. Edward wasn't just fulfilling a promise or repaying a favor. He genuinely cared about Mary Claire's future and was investing his time and energy in her development. Over the following weekends, Mary Claire accompanied Edward on visits to construction sites, engineering offices, and materials laboratories. She met engineers, architects, and technicians who were impressed by her intelligent questions and her ability to understand complex concepts. One afternoon, at a construction site near the Brooklyn waterfront, Mary Claire identified a problem in an electrical installation that had gone unnoticed by the engineers themselves. Her eye, trained for technical details during her afternoons with Mr. Marcus, allowed her to spot an improper connection that could cause future problems. Edward watched the scene with paternal pride. This girl had a rare gift, a technical intuition that couldn't be taught just through books. It was something that came from within, that developed through passion and practice. On the way home, Edward asked Mary Claire a question he had been thinking about for weeks. Have you ever thought about how you want to use this talent you have? What kind of engineer would you like to be? Mary Claire was thoughtful for a few minutes before answering. I want to build things that help people, she said finally. Better houses for those who don't have much money. Schools in places where children need opportunities. Hospitals in neighborhoods that don't have them. Edward felt a tightness in his chest. This girl, even after everything in her life had changed, had not lost the essence that made her special from the beginning, the genuine desire to help others. You know, Mary Claire, he said, his hand gently touching her shoulder, I think you're going to be one of the best engineers this country has ever seen, not just because of your technical competence, but because of your heart. That night, when Mary Claire told Lucy about her day's experiences, mother and daughter talked later than usual. They spoke of dreams, of the future, of how their lives had changed so unexpectedly. Sometimes it feels like a dream, Lucy said, watching her daughter organize the new math and science books she had received from Edward. I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out none of this is real. Mary Claire hugged her mother tightly. It is real, Mom, and you know why? Because we deserved it. Not because we're better than other people, but because we never stopped doing what we thought was right, even when it was hard. Outside, the neighborhood was the same as always, the same streets, the same buildings, the same problems. But inside that fifth-floor apartment, two lives continued to transform day by day, living proof that small acts of kindness can generate waves of change that extend far beyond the moment they occur. 5 years had passed since that rainy morning changed everything. The autumn of 2029 arrived in New York City with its cool mornings and sunny afternoons, and Mary Claire, now 12, walked through the halls of St. Teresa's Academy, carrying a portfolio filled with technical drawings and projects she had created herself. The shy girl, who had once arrived there, afraid of not fitting in, had become one of the school's most brilliant students, not just for her excellent grades in math and science, but for her unique ability to solve practical problems that left even her teachers impressed. On that particular morning in May, something special was happening. Mary Claire was walking towards the main auditorium, where the award ceremony for the National Student Engineering Project competition would be held. At 12 years old, she was the youngest competitor among over 1,000 participants from across the country. Lucy sat in the front row wearing a smart navy blue suit, but with the same expression of pride and tenderness as always. Beside her, Edward Sterling, now 77 but still with an erect posture and an attentive gaze, held a small package wrapped in gold paper. A lot had changed in the last 5 years. Lucy had not only established herself as an exemplary supervisor, but had been promoted to general coordinator of all the company's cleaning teams. Her work was respected at all hierarchical levels, and she had become a benchmark in humane team management. The small apartment in the Bronx had been exchanged for a comfortable house in a middle-class neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it had 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and even a small office where Mary Claire could study and develop her projects. Edward continued to be a constant and caring mentor. He and Mary Claire developed a relationship that blended the affection of a grandfather with the seriousness of a teacher. Every Saturday, he would spend a few hours at their house, always bringing new challenges, interesting books, or learning opportunities. The ceremony began with the presentation of all the finalist projects. When it was Mary Claire's turn, she walked onto the stage with the confidence of someone doing what she truly loved. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the microphone, her voice firm despite her age, "my project is called Smart Homes for Supportive Communities. It is a system for cheap and sustainable construction that allows low-income families to build their own homes using recycled materials and simple technology." For 15 minutes, Mary Claire explained every detail of the project. She showed how she had developed an interlocking technique that eliminated the need for nails and screws, how she had calculated the material's resistance, and how she had devised solutions for natural ventilation and lighting. She talked about costs, sustainability, and social impact. The audience was completely silent throughout her presentation. When she finished, there was a round of applause that lasted almost 2 minutes. Among the judges, composed of renowned engineers and university professors, there were expressions of pure admiration. Lucy and Edward looked at each other, both with tears in their eyes. It was impossible not to remember the 7-year-old girl who fixed cars in the rain, driven only by the desire to help someone in need. When the results were announced, Mary Claire won first place in her category and a special mention from the judging committee for the innovative and social character of her project. The prize included a full scholarship to any engineering university in the country and a sum of money to develop the project in low-income communities. During the award presentation, the chairman of the judging committee made a point of highlighting not only the project's technical competence, but the human values that shone through in every detail. Mary Claire Evans, he said, represents exactly the kind of engineer our country needs, someone who combines exceptional technical knowledge with social responsibility and a genuine love for her fellow human beings. After the ceremony, mother, daughter, and Edward went to a special restaurant to celebrate. During the meal, Edward gave Mary Claire the wrapped package he had brought. Inside was an old wooden box, carefully restored. Mary Claire opened it and found a set of small, well-preserved tools, each in its specific place. "These tools belong to your great-grandfather Anthony," Edward said emotionally. "I asked Lucy to lend them to me so I could have them restored. I thought today would be the perfect day to return them to you." Mary Claire picked up each tool with reverence, feeling the connection to the man she had never known but whose values had shaped her personality. The St. Christopher medallion, which she still wore around her neck, seemed to warm against her skin. "Edward," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "you changed our lives in a way we don't even know how to thank you for." Edward shook his head, smiling. "No, my dear. You changed my life. You reminded me why I started all this. You gave me back my passion for what I do. You taught me that true success isn't measured just by money or power." Paused, looking from Lucy to Mary Claire. "When I was a child, I dreamed of building important things. I built buildings, roads, bridges. But what I built with you was much more important, a chosen family, a legacy of values, proof that kindness always finds a way to multiply." Lucy discreetly wiped away a tear. "I still sometimes wonder what would have happened if Mary Claire hadn't stopped to help you that morning." "It would have been different," Edward admitted. "But I'm sure she would have always found a way to make a difference in someone's life. It's in her nature." After dinner, the three of them went to the apartment where it all began 5 years earlier. Lucy had kept the lease on the place, even after they moved, turning it into a small workshop where Mary Claire could work on her projects and where they sometimes welcomed needy families who needed help with basic repairs. That night, Mary Claire organized her new tools in the workshop, alongside the more modern equipment Edward had given her over the years. The combination of old and new, tradition and innovation, perfectly represented the journey she had taken. As she was working, there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Marcus, the former doorman, now retired but still a frequent visitor. He had followed the family's entire transformation and always showed genuine pride in Mary Claire's successes. "Kiddo," he said, entering the workshop, "I heard about the prize you won today. Can't say I'm surprised. Ever since you were little, you had this gift for understanding how things work." Mr. Marcus picked up one of the restored tools and examined it carefully. "These are like the ones your great-grandpa used. He would be very proud to know that the knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, even without you ever meeting." Mary Claire smiled, hugging the old doorman who had been her first teacher. "You were part of this too, Mr. Marcus. If it weren't for your lessons, I never would have known how to change that tire in the rain." The doorman shook his head, moved. "I just showed you a few basics. The rest was all you, the courage to act, the will to help, the ability to turn a difficult moment into an opportunity to do good." When Mr. Marcus left, Mary Claire stayed alone in the workshop for a few minutes, reflecting on everything that had happened. 5 years earlier, she was a poor girl living in a cramped apartment, dreaming of opportunities. Now she was a talented young woman with a bright future ahead of her, but who had never lost the essence that made her special. She took her great-grandfather Anthony's medallion and held it up to the workshop light. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me, through Mum, that helping people is the most important thing in the world." The next morning, Mary Claire woke up with a new idea. During breakfast, she shared her plans with Lucy and Edward, who had spent the night at their house as he often did on weekends. "I want to use the prize money to create a community workshop here in the neighborhood," she said excitedly. "A place where kids can learn to fix things, where adults can bring broken items to be repaired for free, where we can teach basic construction and repair techniques." Edward and Lucy smiled, knowing this idea was perfectly in line with Mary Claire's personality. Even with all the opportunities now open to her, her first concern was still how to help other people. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Edward said, "and I know exactly how we can do it. I'll donate the space and the necessary equipment. You bring the knowledge and the passion." In the following months, the Anthony Evans Community Workshop became a huge success. Children from the neighborhood came to learn basic principles of mechanics and engineering. Adults brought broken appliances, damaged furniture, small problems that would normally cost them money they didn't have. Mary Claire, even at just 12 years old, became a natural teacher. She taught with the same patience Mr. Marcus had shown her, passing on not just technical knowledge but values of solidarity and community. Edward frequented the workshop regularly, sometimes working side by side with children the same age Mary Claire was when he met her. He saw in that project the materialization of everything he had always believed in, that knowledge and opportunities should be shared, not just accumulated. One afternoon in December, exactly 5 years after their meeting in the rain, Edward was in the workshop helping an 8-year-old boy fix a bicycle when he stopped and looked around. Children working with concentration, adults learning new things, entire families gathered around community projects. Mary Claire approached him, noticing his thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about, Edward?" He smiled, using her first name as he always did when he wanted to show special affection. "I'm thinking that rainy morning was the best flat tire of my life." Mary Claire laughed, hugging the man who had become much more than a mentor. He had become family. "You know, Edward, I'm sure that even if that tire hadn't gone flat, you would have found another way to make a difference in someone's life. Kind people always find ways to spread kindness." When the day ended and everyone went home, Edward stayed alone in the workshop for a few minutes, observing the organized tools, the ongoing projects, the drawings pinned to the wall. In all his years of building buildings and companies, he had never felt as proud of an achievement as he did of that simple space, where the cycle of kindness started on a rainy morning continued to multiply day after day. Outside, life on the street went on its normal rhythm. Cars passed, people walked hurriedly, the world kept spinning. But inside that workshop and in every life it had touched, the proof remained alive that small acts of kindness can generate transformations that extend far beyond the moment they occur, creating waves of hope that continue to spread for generations to come. And Mary Claire, now sleeping peacefully in her comfortable home, still clutching her great-grandfather Anthony's medallion, dreamed of new projects, new ways to help, new ways to turn knowledge into a tool for love and solidarity.